Hey there, my name's Karina, and I'm 53 years old. My husband Timothy is a bit older. He's 56. We've been married almost 30 years, and seemed like we should have gone through fire and water, strengthening our feelings. But unfortunately, our marriage, like an old long not repaired house, slowly but surely wore out. Since the kids left the family nest, our life, once full of laughter and hustle, became dull and predictable, like an endless black and white photo. Our son Andrew 3 years ago moved to New York, barely finishing university to build his career. And daughter Nastya last spring got married and moved to neighboring state, to a small town called Boise. House emptied. It became quiet, too quiet. This silence pressed, reminding of the past, which seemed so alive and bright. My mornings always started the same. Wake up at 6, breakfast, which I cooked out of habit, mechanically, like a robot. Timothy ate silently, deep in his thoughts, and already at 7 he left the house, heading to his office in Chicago. There waited for him a managerial position in a big logistics company, with which, as I understood, connected not only prestigious position, but also huge responsibility. "Hey," sounded from the doorway when he left, while my mechanical answer from the kitchen, where I already stood with back to him, preparing for a new day. Earlier, long ago, I walked him to the gate, waved hand, while his figure didn't disappear around the corner. Now, these times seemed a distant dream. My own life also didn't shine with bright colors. 4 days a week, I worked cashier in local supermarket in our small provincial town called Tulsa. This was, of course, not the career I dreamed about. In youth, I saw myself successful designer, or, at worst, boss of my own business. But years went, dreams faded, and age didn't allow to claim something bigger. Sometimes, standing at the cash register, I caught myself thinking that my life turned into endless chain of monotonous operations. Scanning goods, counting change, polite smiles. Evenings also were deprived of any intrigue. Timothy returned home around 9 to 6. He found me in front of the TV, where I pointlessly flipped channels, trying to fill the emptiness that reigned around. "Hey," he said, "how's it going?" My routine question, "Gonna eat dinner, take a bath?" And on that, our dialogue ended. We didn't care how each other's day went, like we lived on different planets. I already ate dinner long ago when Timothy sat at the table. He opened a bottle of beer, and we both silently devoured food, each in own thoughts. I usually sat opposite, buried in smartphone, trying to distract from the oppressive silence. "Tired today?" once he muttered. I just nodded, not looking up from the screen. Yeah. Escaped from me, this indifferent tone. I know, hurt him, but I already couldn't force myself to be different. Where that Karina, who could listen for hours to his stories? Where that Timothy, who shared everything in the world? We both changed, and these changes turned out irreversible. Even bedrooms we had separate. This started 3 years ago, when Timothy referred to my snoring. I then agreed, not to blow up a fight, but in reality, I felt that we both just tired of each other, tired of this forced closeness. His presence in one room became something like a burden. And here, one Friday evening, happened something that knocked me off track. Timothy came home, and his voice, which usually sounded monotonous and tired, was an octave higher than usual. "I'm home," came from the hallway. I glanced at the clock, 11th hour. Remembered, he said they had a corporate party today. He stumbled into the living room, swaying a bit. His cheeks were flushed, eyes shining. He was drunk, but I, for the first time in a long time, saw him so relaxed, alive. "Was it fun?" I asked, turning off the TV. "Oh yeah, we had such a cool time. Went to karaoke." He smiled, and this smile, sincere and light, reminded me of our youth. How long since we two went somewhere, just to laugh and relax? I couldn't remember. He, swaying, headed to the bathroom, and I, like hypnotized, waited for his return. Half an hour later, he appeared in the living room, wrapped in a bathrobe. Wet hair stuck to his forehead, drops of water running down them. From him smelled shampoo, and this fresh scent, mixed with light smell of alcohol, filled the room. Karina. He sat next to me on the couch, and his eyes, usually dim, glowed with some unusual fire. What I felt, how my heart starts beating faster. Long time we weren't close. he whispered, and his gaze slid over my body. I didn't immediately understand what he meant. In head flashed thoughts about our rare formal kisses, about our separate beds. "What about?" I asked, though a guess already born in my head. He stared at me with his dilated pupils, and in them read so much hope, so much desire. This was so long ago that I couldn't remember when we last were truly close. Year, 2, or even more. "What, no?" In his voice sounded a note of offense. "Nah, what you talkin'?" Just unexpected, I stumbled, trying to find the right words. Maybe this is a chance. Chance to revive what long died between us. Chance to restore the connection we lost so long ago. Okay, let's go to the bedroom. I stood up, feeling how inside me something comes alive. We took hands. His palm, so warm and familiar, squeezed mine. We walked to the bedroom, and this path seemed endless, filled with anticipation and fear. But reality turned out way more cruel than my naive hopes. We kissed. Our lips met after a long break. I felt his warmth, his smell, and for a moment it seemed everything would return to normal. We took off each other's clothes, and my body, though not young, still kept tenderness. His skin was just as soft and familiar, but when it came to the main thing, his body betrayed him. It didn't respond to my touches, to my caresses. He tried to hide it, but it was useless. His disappointment was obvious. "Sorry, I'm probably just tired," he muttered, turning away. I said nothing, just looked at him, and in my eyes I felt reflected disappointment and understanding and some bitter hopelessness. "It's okay. Don't stress." I got up and put on my pajamas. He hastily dressed, and between us hung awkward silence, heavy and pressing. "Good night," I said, heading to my room. "Good," came his voice. I stayed alone in the dark, staring at the ceiling. How humiliating, I thought. He's 56. Is this the end? Is he no longer a man? Or maybe this is the end for both of us? From that evening, the gap between us became even deeper. Even morning high and by became strained. We avoided each other's gaze, like in our eyes reflected everything we couldn't say out loud. I started taking more shifts at the supermarket, more often going to girls' nights with colleagues. He, in turn, stayed late at work, sitting at the computer till late, though I knew there was no urgent work. So flew 2 months. One Saturday, when I already forgot what spontaneity is, rang the phone. It was Vlad, my old university buddy with whom we once studied together in Denver. "Hey, Karina, how's life?" His voice sounded just as energetic as 25 years ago. "We're getting together with the guys next weekend. Coming?" The guys, that's our common friends from the college club, where, by the way, Timothy and I met. Vlad was one of those who saw how our love blossomed. "Invite Timothy, too. Come together," he added, like he read my mind. No point refusing. Maybe this would be that breath of fresh air we both desperately needed. And in the company of others, probably easier for us to talk without this oppressive silence. On the appointed day, we left the house. Train ride to the regional center to Portland was just as silent as all our joint trips lately. I peered into the flashing landscapes outside the window, trying to guess what this evening would bring. We arrived at a small, cozy cafe cozy in the city center. As soon as we entered, we were hugged by a wave of warmth and friendly shouts. "Go, Karina, Timothy." Haven't changed a bit. "Hugging me," exclaimed our common friend Stan, with whom we once shared one lecture hall in art history classes. Next to him stood Michael, our eternal joker, who immediately started pouring out jokes. "Come on, Stan. We're not the same." I laughed for the first time in a long time, feeling truly relaxed. Memories of college years flooded in. We recalled our crazy parties, sleepless nights before exams, first crushes, and, of course, our unforgettable movie theater trips, where we watched every new release, devouring buckets of popcorn. Alcohol flowed like a river, laughter got louder, and I saw how Timothy relaxed too. His face lit up, eyes sparkled. I always knew I had some special charisma, but that evening it showed full force. I was in my element, smiling, joking, talking to everyone like there were no years of separation. The men around me just melted. My bright orange dress flowing over my figure with a deep but elegant V-neck attracted looks. To it I picked suede low-heel shoes that comfortably hugged the foot and emphasized the grace of my ankles, and a thin silver bracelet on the wrist that quietly jingled with every move. I felt beautiful, desired, and this was a forgotten but intoxicating feeling. Timothy, as usual, stayed a bit aside, watching me with a light smile. I saw in his gaze something new, some spark that hadn't been there in ages. After the cafe, we decided to continue the evening in a karaoke bar nearby. When we entered a private room, I, without noticing how it happened, ended up between Stan and Michael. Both single, both back in college, were a little in love with me. "Karina, what we gonna sing? Maybe something from our youth?" asked Stan, and his eyes sparkled. I felt how alcohol speeds up the blood. Everyone was in high spirits. We hugged, slapped each other on shoulders like we returned to carefree college years. I stood up, took the mic. Okay, then I picked our favorite song from the 90s, which we often sang at parties. Stan and Michael immediately stood on both sides of me, and we three started singing, hugging. We swayed to the music, sometimes glanced at each other, and in every glance read common history, common memories. At some moment, Stan grabbed my waist, pulling closer. Michael from the other side did the same. I didn't resist. On the contrary, I enjoyed this feeling of closeness, this sensation of male hands, on my body. I rocked in their hugs, feeling free, uninhibited, like I hadn't been in many years. I saw Timothy. He sat in the corner of the couch, watching us. Usually in such situation he would be jealous. His face would darken. But now I saw something completely different. His eyes burned with some strange, almost wild excitement. And in that moment, looking at how I enjoy attention of other men, I felt something incredible. This wasn't jealousy, but rather arousal. The feeling that my body, my presence, my femininity can cause such reaction, such passion in others, filled me with some primal power. I saw myself through their eyes, eyes of men who desired me. And this was incredible. I suddenly thought, what if Timothy saw me with another? With others? This thought pierced me like an electric shock. What is this feeling? I'm 53, and for the first time in life I experienced something like this. All the way back on the train to Tulsa, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. Timothy slept, head on my shoulder. This was so long ago that I almost forgot this sensation, his warmth, his breathing, light smell of his cologne. My body came alive. It responded to his closeness, even though he slept. When we arrived at our station, I woke him. "We're here," I whispered. Yeah, sorry," he stretched. At home, he immediately went to his bedroom. "Timothy." I called him. "What?" He turned. "You looked so happy today." I liked it. I tried to pick words so not to seem too pushy. "You looked happy too. Stan and Michael, they still crushing on you." In his voice sounded light smirk. I felt blush flood my cheeks. "What you talking?" "We're just friends," I answered, though knew it's not entirely true. We said nothing more, but between us hung some new unclear tension. From that day in my head settled thoughts. Thoughts about how I could be with another man, with a young man, with several men. And every time I imagined this, I felt rush of warmth, excitement, almost euphoria. And the more I thought about it, the stronger my desire became. Strangely, but this desire strengthened my love for Timothy too. I rediscovered my own attractiveness, my femininity, seeing it through others' eyes. But how to explain this to him? How to share such thoughts? I even started searching online if there are people with same strange desires. And, to my surprise, there were many. But how to tell husband? My fantasies became bolder. At work, looking at young colleagues, I caught myself thinking, who of them could be mine? This improper thought made me blush. And finally, I decided. Thursday came, and I decided to act. Coming home after work, I found Timothy at usual evening activity. He was browsing news on tablet. My heart pounded, but I knew I had to do this. "Timothy," I started, trying to keep voice even. He raised eyes, looking questioningly. I came closer, sat opposite on couch so our knees almost touched. We need to talk. He put down tablet, and I saw usual wariness in his eyes. Something happened, Karina. His voice was calm as always, but I felt tension in the air. Yes, happened. This concerns us. Our relationship. I took deep breath. Remember how uncomfortable you felt when we tried to be? Well, you get it. His face slightly reddened, and he looked away. Karina, please, no need about this, he muttered. No, Timothy, need. I took his hand. His palm was warm, but a bit tense. I know back then you felt out of place, and I understand. But I thought, remember how you liked how I talked with the guys at the reunion? He raised eyes, and in them flashed something like interest. Yeah, you were alive, he answered, carefully picking the word. And you looked interested. I tried to put all my hope into this word. I saw how you watched, like you liked it. He was silent, but his gaze didn't leave my face. I decided to go all the way. Listen, this probably gonna seem very strange to you, maybe even wild. But here's what I thought. What if we try something new? Something that can reignite the spark between us again? Something that brings back to both of us the feeling of life? I felt my voice tremble, but I couldn't stop. I know it sounds crazy, but what if we invite someone to our place, young guys, and you watch me with them, you'll be right there. And I stumbled, and I'll be for you, but through them. Timothy looked at me like I lost my mind. His brows were furrowed, mouth slightly open. I saw shock in his eyes, disbelief, and then something else. Something like curiosity. Karina, you in your right mind? Finally, he squeezed out. What are you saying? This is, I understand it seems wild. I interrupted him. But think, what do we have to lose? We already lost almost everything. We live like neighbors. This could be our chance to feel something together again. I let go of his hand and stood up, walked to the window, hugged myself by the shoulders. I just want us to be happy again, Timothy. I want to feel desired again. And you, I think, want this too. Behind my back, silence reigned. I waited tensely for his answer. Finally, he got up and came to me. He put hands on my shoulders, and I felt the warmth of his fingers through the thin fabric of my home t-shirt. Karina, his voice was low, almost a whisper. I don't know what to say. This is too unexpected. I'm not asking you to agree right away, I answered, turning to him. Just think about it. Okay. He looked into my eyes, and I saw in his gaze a mix of confusion, fear, and some strange new hope. Okay, finally, he said. I'll think. The next few days were filled with nervous waiting. We both avoided the topic, but I felt it hanging in the air, invisibly present between us. I caught his glances on me, sometimes thoughtful, sometimes studying. He was clearly thinking something over. On Friday evening, when I was coming home after shift, I got a message from Timothy. I invited someone for Saturday. 3, young, unmarried. My heart jumped. He agreed. This was incredible and scary. Saturday morning, I started preparing. I chose my best home dress, light, flowing, made of soft blue silk, with open shoulders that barely covered thin straps. It fit me perfectly, emphasizing all the curves. And when I moved, the fabric slightly hugged the hips, creating a barely noticeable erotic sensation. With it, I wore sandals on a small stable heel, which subtly emphasized the grace of my feet. From jewelry, only a thin chain with a small teardrop pendant on the neck, which dropped just below the collarbones. I did light makeup, let down my hair, letting it fall freely on shoulders. I wanted to look attractive, but not vulgar. I wanted to be myself, but an enhanced, bolder version of myself. Timothy was fussing too. He brought from the pantry an old but solid coffee maker, put on the table homemade pickles, jam. We both were excited, but each in own way. They'll come at 6, he said, checking the watch. I told them we're just going to hang out friendly, talk about work, introduce them to my wife. I nodded, feeling my palms sweat. At 6, the doorbell rang. Timothy went to open. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my wildly beating heart. I stood in the living room, waiting. Soon Timothy entered. Behind him followed 3 young guys. They were about 25, 27, all tall, built, with open, a bit embarrassed faces. "Karina, meet. This is Andrew, Max, and Sergey. Introduce Timothy, my guys from the department. And this is my wife, Karina. Nice to meet you." Andrew, the tallest of the 3, first extended his hand to me. His gaze lingered on me a bit longer than needed. "You look so young, Karina," exclaimed Max, and his cheeks slightly reddened. Sergey just smiled, his eyes shining. "Thanks, boys. Come in. Make yourselves at home." I smiled at them, trying to look relaxed. On the table waited a real American spread. Appetizing fried burgers, mashed potatoes with butter and dill, fresh salad from cucumbers and tomatoes, homemade pickles, and, of course, iced tea. Drinks, a few bottles of light wine and beer. "Help yourselves, please, all home style," I offered. We sat at the table. At first, the atmosphere was a bit tense. Guys felt stiff, which is totally natural. They ended up in their boss's house. But Timothy, to my surprise, was on point. He told stories from their work life, cracked jokes, and gradually the ice melted. I jumped into the convo too. I talked about my supermarket gig, my hobbies. Lately, I started painting with watercolor. Guys listened with interest, asked questions. I felt their gazes sometimes linger on me, on my smile, on my hands. My dress seems did its job. It was modest enough not to cause outright embarrassment, but open enough to spark male imagination. My legs, freely crossed under the table, barely peeked from under the hem, and I felt their gazes slide over them. "Andrew, you got a girlfriend?" I asked at some point, switching to more personal stuff. "Nah, Karina, haven't met the one yet," answered Andrew, and his face pinked up. "How come? Such a handsome guy." I smiled at him. "Your burgers are super tasty, Karina," said Max, changing the topic. "My wife could learn, so find one who cooks good." I laughed. Evening went its way. Alcohol loosened everyone, and we all got more open. I felt tension building in the room. Timothy, though active in chat, didn't take eyes off me. I saw in his gaze mix of thrill and anticipation. I got that he was waiting too, waiting for the moment we moved to the main part of our experiment. Evening already past midnight, and we still sat at the table. Empty wine and beer bottles stood in the center, and on the guys' faces spread content, slightly mellow smiles. I felt the vibe heated up, and time came for what we all gathered for. "Listen, guys," started Timothy, and I noticed his voice slightly shake. He took a deep breath, then looked at me, like seeking backup. I just nodded lightly, letting know I'm with him. "You know, Karina and I going through rough patch right now. In the relationship, I mean. We kinda drifted apart long ago." Room hung awkward silence. Andrew, Max, and Sergey glanced at each other, clearly not getting where their boss headed. "And so," continued Timothy. His voice got a bit louder. In it appeared some determination. I thought, we need something to bring back the spark, something to make us feel alive together again. He looked at me again, and in his eyes I saw that familiar curiosity mixed with worry. So, Timothy exhaled heavy. I want you to help us. I need to see again how desirable my wife is, to see how you, admire her. I want you to get close with her, and I'll watch." Shock. That's what I read on the young guys' faces. Andrew dropped his fork. Max froze, and Sergey opened eyes wide, like not believing his ears. I saw in their eyes mix of confusion, awkwardness, and maybe even disgust. "Timothy, what you saying?" I tried to stop him, but he was already on a roll. "No, Karina, it's true. This is our chance. I want to see how other men passionately desire my wife. I want to feel that excitement again, that arousal I felt at the reunion." He turned to the guys. His eyes burned. "Please, this is super important for us, for our marriage." Sergey first found strength to speak. "Timothy, we respect you a ton, but this is kinda super unusual." "I get it." Timothy raised hands in peace gesture. "I know it's crazy, but I'm begging you. This is the only way to get our Karina back, get our family back." And then he did what totally stunned me. He got on his knees in front of 3 young guys, in front of his subordinates. His 56-year-old boss knelt, pleading, "Please, this is my life. This is my wife. I'll do anything for you. Any favor, any help at work." I felt my heart squeeze from a mix of shame and some weird new hope. I never saw him like this. So desperate, so vulnerable. Andrew, Max, and Sergey looked totally lost. They glanced at each other, clearly not knowing how to react. But in their eyes, I started noticing something else. Curiosity, intrigue, and maybe even light arousal. "Karina, you okay with this?" Unsure, asked Max, turning to me. I looked at Timothy. He still knelt, his eyes full of plea. I saw in them not just desperation, but hope for revival. And in that moment, I had to do this not just for him, but for myself, for our marriage. "Yeah," I said quietly. I'm in, but just this once." Guys glanced again. Sergey, the boldest of three, smirked. "Since Timothy asking so much, and you too, Karina, why not?" In his voice sounded something that made me shiver, predatory spark, which I maybe lit myself. I felt cheeks flood with blush. I stood up, and my silk dress hugged my figure like second skin. I walked to Andrew, the tallest of them. He looked at me with wide-open eyes. His breathing quickened. I raised hand and slowly, gently ran fingertips over his cheek. His skin was hot. I leaned to him, and my gaze dropped to his lips. I saw how he swallowed. I felt my own body respond to this tension, to this forbidden closeness. I pressed to his lips. At first he was tense, but then relaxed and answered my kiss, pulling me to him. His hands wrapped my waist, drawing me closer. I felt the heat of his body, his strong hugs. This was so unexpected, so thrilling. Max and Sergey watched us. Their faces reddened, eyes burned. I saw how they watched enchanted. I pulled away from Andrew and, without a word, turned to Max. He stood like rooted. His gaze locked on my chest, which barely covered the thin fabric of the dress. I took his hand and slowly, very slowly placed it on my chest. He flinched, but didn't pull away. I saw how his fingers started gently squeezing, and his eyes closed. I felt his body start shaking from desire. Timothy stood nearby. His eyes were glued to us. I saw how his chest heaved heavy, how he clenched fists. His face was tense, but at the same time on it read incredible arousal. My own body, seems, responded to this tension too. I felt pleasant warmth building in lower belly. I pulled away from Max and walked to Sergey. He was less embarrassed than the others, and in his gaze read impatience. I took his hand and ran it over my neck, then lowered to my collarbones, then to chest, and finally to the line of my body. I felt his fingers tremble from anticipation. "Don't be shy," I whispered to him. "You can do what you want." Sergey Seems waited for this. He yanked the fabric of my dress, unbuttoning a few buttons, and my dress flew open, exposing even more body. My chest freed, and he immediately greedily pressed to one. His tongue circled the sensitive spot, and other hand stroked my waist. Timothy growled. This was a low, guttural sound, filled with primal desire. I saw how his body shakes, how he tries to hold back. "You mine?" I whispered to Sergey, and his eyes, wide open, met mine. In them burned pure, furious passion. I got on knees before Sergey, then before Andrew, then before Max. Each of them was gripped by desire. My hands caressed them, my lips kissed them, my eyes looked at them. And in every move, in every touch, I felt Timothy's arousal, who was nearby, who watched. This was madness, this was improper, but this was incredible. I felt how in me awakened some dormant power, some wild, primal femininity that was locked so long. I looked at Timothy, who now stood opposite me. His eyes were dilated, his breathing heavy. I saw how his body trembles from restrained desire. And in that moment, I understood we crossed the line. We entered a world that will change us forever. That night, my world turned upside down. All my life seemed was just a prelude to this moment. My body, hidden for years under layers of routine and habit, woke up. I felt Max's touch, heard Andrew's heavy breathing, saw Sergey's burning gaze. Each of them gave me something new, something unexplored. I dropped to knees before Max. My blue silk dress, now open, exposed almost everything. I felt his hand gently but insistently slide down my back, pulling me closer. My fingers, like on their own, unbuckled his belt, and I felt the touch of his hot skin. I looked into his eyes, then slowly, very slowly lowered gaze. "You're so incredible, Karina," whispered Max. His voice was broken. I felt my own body respond to this desire. I was desired. I was passion. I was a woman who could awaken male instincts. And this was intoxicating. Meanwhile, Timothy, as I saw from the corner of eye, stood very close. His breathing was heavy and ragged, his eyes glued to us, and I saw in them incredible arousal. It was so strong that seemed filled the whole room. I felt his energy, his passion transfer to me. "Love when you look like that," I whispered, raising eyes to Timothy. My voice was hoarse from excitement. He swallowed, and I saw drops of sweat run down his face. Then I felt Sergei's touch, who came from behind. He hugged me, his hands slid over my hips, pressing me to him. This was so unexpected, so sensual. I felt his young, strong body behind my back. Andrew stood opposite, his eyes wide open, in them red mix of awe and lust. I raised hand and beckoned him to me. He came like in a dream, and I took his hand, placing it on my chest, which heaved heavy in time with my racing heart. He squeezed it, and I felt shiver run through his body. Timothy, meanwhile, was on the edge. He growled, his body trembled, and I knew he barely held back. I sank onto the couch, my dress already almost fully slipped off me, exposing my body. I felt light breeze that touched my skin, and this was incredibly liberating. Max leaned over me, his lips found mine, and he started kissing me greedily, passionately. His hands slid over my body, exploring every curve. Sergei dropped nearby. His gaze didn't leave me. He started gently stroking my hair, then his fingers slid down my neck to my collarbones. I felt his breathing on my skin, and this caused goosebumps. Andrew joined too. He lay on the other side, his head comfortably settled on my chest. I felt his warmth, his breathing, and this was so tender, so intimate. Timothy watched all this. His eyes were dilated, his breathing heavy. He was fully absorbed in what was happening. I saw how his body trembles from restrained desire, and this only strengthened my own arousal. I felt like a goddess. I felt like a woman who could control male desires. And this was incredible. Night passed in a whirlwind of feelings and sensations. I didn't know what to say when the guys, embarrassed and a bit confused, left in the morning. On goodbye, they just nodded to Timothy and me, and their gazes were full of some strange mix of embarrassment and admiration. When the door closed behind them, we stayed alone. In the room reigned mess. Empty glasses, scattered crumbs. My silk dress lay on the floor, but in the air hung something new, something electric. "So how?" I asked. My voice was hoarse from tiredness, but at the same time it sounded notes of triumph. I picked up my dress, feeling how it softly slides over my body, and slowly, gently put it on. Timothy came to me. His eyes were deep, in them red mix of amazement, relief, and some new unfamiliar passion. He reached hand and gently stroked me on the cheek. "Karina," he whispered. I don't know what to say. This was incredible. "You satisfied?" I asked, looking into his eyes. He nodded. "Yeah, very. I haven't felt so alive in ages." I hugged him, and he tightly pressed me to him. His hands, so strong and familiar, hugged me like they hadn't in many years. I felt how his body trembles from emotions, and I understood we found our path. Strange, unusual, maybe judged by society, but ours. The next months our life changed. We became closer than ever. Our talks became deeper, our touches tender. Timothy started courting me again, giving flowers, inviting on dates. And I felt desired woman again, who could awaken passion. But happiness, as known, is fleeting. After 3 months, I started feeling again how habit sneaks up unnoticed. That same grayness that once swallowed our marriage started seeping into our relationship again. And though we tried as we could, I felt the fire slowly dying. One evening, when we lay hugging, Timothy broke the silence. "Karina," he whispered, his voice thoughtful. "Remember that evening?" I knew what he meant. I felt my heart start beating faster. "I thought," he continued, "maybe we try again, but with others." I turned to him. In his eyes, I saw the same curiosity, the same anticipation that was the first time. And I understood we hooked. We tried the forbidden fruit, and it turned out too sweet. Since then, special evenings became part of our life. We invited young guys, sometimes even girls. Timothy always was nearby, watched, enjoyed, and I gave myself to this feeling, this passion, this freedom. Now I'm 55, Timothy 58. We still arrange these special evenings once a month. And every time I rediscover Timothy, and he me, our relationship became stronger than ever. We learned to understand each other, accept each other as we are, with all our quirks and desires. Our kids will never know about this. This is our secret, our intimate mystery. And maybe thanks to it, we stay whole. Recently, Karina said, "Timothy, what if we try adding a woman or several women?" And I understood our adventure is far from over, that our boundaries not yet defined, and that our love, so unusual and multifaceted, will continue developing in the most unexpected directions. That's our story. Not perfect, non-standard. Maybe to someone it'll seem shocking, but for us it's real, and it makes us happy. In the end, love takes all kinds of forms, and we found ours.